Welcome inside episode 582 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, alongside Brandon Pillar up in the Blue Mountain. And today we are going to make our case for Alfie to the Hockey Hall of Fame. No, not this Alfie that's
trying to run to the hall right now.
Please get to the hall, Alfie. Yes, Daniel Alfredsson to the Hockey Hall of Fame. We need to make it happen. There's a great initiative going on through social media right now. So, Pilsy, why not have Craig Medaglia a part of today's show?
The man who started the movement. And yes, we are pumping the Alfie to the Hall train even louder than previous years, Ross. It is about time to get number 11 in there. And hey, we got some good prospects we're looking at today as well. A couple of defensemen that could be high draft selections this year.
Working our way up to pick number 11, which will happen tomorrow. All right, let's get into all that and more. This is the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.
Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Senators your first listen on this Thursday, June 16th. We are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube, where the best way you can help the show grow is to smash the like button below, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Today's comment, it's super easy. Put Alfie to the Hall. We want to know your favorite Daniel Alfredsson memory. Pilsy, it's a complete travesty that he's not in the Hall of Fame. How pumped were you to see that Twitter account blow up when it came to life yesterday?
It is about time the Alfie to the Hall movement is blowing up fully, Ross. We've tried to push it along. We got the ball rolling a little bit, but now it's an absolute avalanche going down the hill here. Everyone is tweeting the hashtag Alfie to the Hall. The new Twitter account is almost at 2,000 followers within, a week or something. And we've got some notable quote tweets. Everyone is joining in on this movement, and it's about damn time that Daniel Alfredsson gets some Hockey Hall of Fame recognition.
And the movement was started by two fans, but they had to bring in the heavy hitters to get this off the ground. We're talking Surreal leader and friend of the show, Craig Medaglia, who joins us now. Craig, what's going on, buddy? It's a long time coming to get this movement off of the ground. Take us behind the scenes. How did this whole thing go from an idea to what we've seen grow so far?
Yeah, man. So I think it was in the fall of 2020, right? Nobody was really doing anything. This is like, I think they were still working out the bubble playoff stuff and whatever else. And Cyril leader actually reached out to me because he knew this is something that we were both kind of passionate about. He's actually hit me up in the past. He's always said, like, someone's got to make a big video or a big push, and he's always been kicking the tires on that. And so he said, hey, would you be interested? We got a couple fans that they've done all the legwork, right? They're figuring out the process, which in itself, like, to unravel the Hockey Hall of Fame submission process, like, it's not easy. It's hard to do. And that's something I mentioned yesterday, which is like, it should be hard to get in the Hall of Fame, right? It's the Hall of Fame. Like, if everyone could get in it, it wouldn't mean anything. So it's a tricky process, but they found a bit of I don't want to say loophole, but there's a bylaw that allows for anyone to just put forward a candidate, right? It was meant to just kind of, if a player wasn't, a team wasn't willing to go to bat for a player or an international organization or whatever, some fans or whoever, their agent or whatever could present the case forward. So we use that provision to do it for Daniel Alfredsson. Kind of at the time, right, 2020, Daniel Alfredsson wasn't really on the Ottawa Senators' mind to help get into the Hall of Fame, and he hadn't been for many years. And that was something that I dealt with a little bit when I worked there, which was kind of like, you don't talk about it, right? You don't. So when it comes up every year and everybody's starting to do that push, it was just like, okay, we had to avoid it. And the thing we always dreaded was like, what if we got in? Like, what if we got in and the team hadn't done anything? It's just like, how bad does that look? So I always dreaded it. Like, it was something that I always worked, like, every year I'd say, like, hey, we're going to do anything, and I was always told, like, no, stand down. And so I get it. Right. That was the time. But you know, what's great is the times are changing. Right. Yes. So to be able, that was really kind of when we knew this had a really good chance to be successful, was when we were pushing ahead regardless, right? Whether the team was on board or Alfie was on board, we were pushing forward regardless, because this is important. And if the team wasn't going to do it, we felt Someone should, even just to get it started, right? Like get the attention, get some actual attention going. But I mean, as you saw, kind of a few things go right, and the team steps in as well, and they're willing to support the bid, and so it's been a crazy mix of everything going right and kind of manifesting itself into a pretty cool little movement for Sens Twitter.
And that's the thing that just frustrates me is the Ottawa Senators have been around long enough. This is the greatest Ottawa Senator of all time. He's been sitting, waiting to get his name called by the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's deserved of that achievement. And there just wasn't any spotlight. There wasn't any push. I mean, Ross, remember when Hossa was inducted into the Hall of Fame? It was a massive moment because it was finally drafted Ottawa Senator. Like that, we're making connections here rather than having the greatest senator of all time be recognized. We have to go and make reaches, be like, oh, one of our drafted players made it. Like,
who won 3 cups somewhere else.
Yeah, his time is most notable other places. Like, it's about time that someone who was an Ottawa Senator, the captain here for a long time, that they get the proper recognition. And I think now with the times changing, like you said, times are changing in the Ottawa Senators franchise. This is the time to make that push. Fans are engaging more than ever. And I really think that this is the perfect time for all this to line up.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned he's the greatest Ottawa Senator of all time. Like, I think that goes without saying. Like, he's one of the greatest Swedish players to ever play.
Yeah,
he's one of the greatest NHL captains to ever play. Like, these are all true statements that when you pair them with the stats and the numbers and the achievements and the accomplishments, and then pair that with his off-ice contributions, like somebody once said, and I love this saying, is like he was pumping mental health way before it was cool. Like way before Bell Let's Talk, like before any of that stuff, before it was kind of a touchy subject, especially in hockey, right? To admit some kind of mental weakness. Like he did that. He did that before it was socially kind of acceptable and applauded. Like he took that risk and kind of told his story about some things. And that affects a lot of people. And you hear that when you hear his teammates speak about him, what kind of captain he is, right? Chris Neal or Mark Mathot yesterday was talking about that as well. It's just like, he's just the integrity that he has. It's like, he makes you act different around him because you have so much respect for him as a person, as a player and a leader and all those things that, I mean, you factor all those things in, and I think he's a slam dunk, but you know what? That's okay. If he's not, I get it. The lens some people are looking at it through is a little different, and that's
blue tinted lens, maybe.
Right, and also like because the team, he hasn't been a presence really like in a big way for how long? Like he was back for a little bit. I would say since his jersey retirement, and that was. Four or 5 years ago? So you haven't, that's one of my favorite things about putting that video together is I got to touch and handle a lot of highlights and things I haven't been able to play with forever, right? Like these goals and these moments and that Darcy Tucker hit that we were talking about before, like those are all things that like you don't forget about them, but if you don't see them and you're not reminded about it constantly, like that's a guy that I think people forgot how much he's done, like how absolutely elite he was. Like when we were looking at some of the stats from the video before, like where he ranks kind of right in his era, right? The 2000s to 2010. There it is. Like he's third, and look at the guys he's behind. Like he's during that decade, right? Like those are Hall of Famers there, right? And he's right up at the top. So
and they have more games played too.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Like Jerome McGinley, who was a slam dunk Hall of Famer, right? During that era, which was arguably Jerome McGinley's best era as well, right? Like point per game, Alfie trucked him. So it happens a lot. Like you see those things, and I think you kind of forget. And I mean, imagine if that lockout year wasn't a wash. That was arguably his like most prime year.
True.
It was lost completely.
100%.
So it's. Just imagine what those extra points, those extra games could have meant. That extra playoff push could have meant that year. So it's, I mean, when you start laying it all out, and that's really what the account's meant to do, right? Is we're just going to slowly show, hey, here's another thing. Hey, compared to these guys, hey, did you know that he leads in this? And like, once you start pulling his international resume, and it's nuts, guys. Like this guy's one of the best hockey players to ever play. He played in our city forever. Captain, like he means so much. I think it's time for the Ottawa Senators to get a little recognition in the Hall of Fame. right? And I mean,
Yep.
even some stupid ones too. Like he scored the first ever shootout goal in league history. Like that's a cool thing, right? Like
That is
Beat the
cool.
Leafs nonetheless.
I'm pretty sure his stick is in the Hall of Fame for that already. So
I agree, man. That's where I was going.
plaque.
Is like, that's it, man. We already got a little bit in there. Let's add some more. So, I think that there's been some really cool stories like that. The Hamburglar run, like there's a little bit of Hall of Fame stuff around the Ottawa Senators, but like the recognition of one player who really kind of epitomizes the franchise and is more than worthy to be there. Like we just want to convince the committee to just look at it, right? Take a look at it and compare it to what you got here. But take a look at it seriously, right? Like, I think now's the time and to see all the support on social media. Like our whole plan is like the committee meets not this weekend, but the next weekend. And then by the 27th, they announce their who's going in this year. And so, yeah, our plan is like, okay, well, let's present the case in public too. Like everything that you're seeing is in the submission, right? Like these are all stats that Corey and Steven pulled that I think they did a great job. Because I mean, the more I read about it, I was like, okay, this is going to be, I don't want to say easy, but we have the ammunition. It's just like, let's just shoot it the right way. So I think that once you kind of start seeing all those things that, it makes the case. So we got to convince this committee here to take a look at it. And we just need a couple voices in that room to go, you know what, man, like these guys are right. So publicly, we're just trying to win public favor right now. We're trying to get everybody on the same page, everybody using the same hashtags, saying the same things. And we're ready to talk about the reasons against him too, right? Like if people want to talk about the fact that he hasn't won a Stanley Cup, like we'll talk about that too. There's a lot of people in the Hall of Fame that have never won a Stanley Cup. Like it hasn't disqualified them. So it just means your resume has to be pretty much bulletproof. And I'd argue that his is close to that. So the stat that, again, this is a Stephen and Corey stat, is that like since 2000, it's 28% of inductees haven't won a Stanley Cup. So It's like, okay, so that's not insane, right? One in three pretty much. And they're going to induct 5. So give us 1, throw 2 more to some cup boys, and then who cares, right? Like it's all good. So I think there's a way he gets in. I really hope it's this year, just given the magnitude of how well everything's going, the vibes around everything, right? Just seem to be pointing in a direction where it's like, man, this would be a good time to do it. So I really hope it's this year, but God forbid if it's not, because I understand this process is crazy sometimes. I'm pretty happy with the headway that we've made. And at least it's made it back into the conversation again. And there's way more advocates and way more people pushing in one direction now. So it used to be like you'd see an article pop up or a podcast and they'd kind of make the case and it'd be well put together. But it's like, once we all band together, it's like we can trend in Canada, right? We can pop 3,000 retweets on a video. Like, that really shows the kind of the commitment of the fan base and their passion for the product. And I think you're seeing a lot of people. I know we talked about some of the players chiming in and how maybe some of the players that Alfie played with, they're not really Twitter guys. And you're seeing that a little bit too with the fan. Like you're seeing a lot of older fans really chime in and help us drive this because they remember that stuff. That was their guy. So
how about no profile picture Radek Bonk throwing out the hashtag?
He's the best. The best is like the group was like, "Are we sure that's Radek Bonk?" I was like, "Yeah, that's Radek Bonk." So he's that was great, man. Like I love that kind of stuff. So it's neat to see like young and old, like across the board, the Sens kind of online community. They're all behind it, which is really it's neat. It's cool to see like kind of a unified campaign. So we're pretty lucky that worked out that way.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can see I pulled up the 1994 draft. The reason being, a little name drop, Radek Bonk there. The 3rd overall pick finds himself about 10th in total points from that draft. And you notice the guy who's in first happened to be drafted 133rd overall. Yes, it's Daniel Alfredsson with 1,157 points. Craig mentions no Stanley Cup. Well, I don't think it's the National Hockey League Hall of Fame. I believe it's the Hockey Hall of Fame. And not only does he have a gold medal, but he led that Olympics in scoring. He's also been to 5 Olympics, silver medal in there. You mentioned the lockout year. Well, what did he do? Went over to Sweden and won a championship. Was the top scorer in that Swedish Hockey League playoffs. But my favorite stat, and I'm sure you guys will touch on this in your campaign, and if not, here's a free idea. Yeah. The Senators' playoff appearances in franchise history. They've had a team for 28 seasons because the lockout year 29, we're coming up on the 30th anniversary. With Alfredsson on the team, 13 playoff appearances in 16 years. Without him, 2 in 12. And one of them, he was a member of the front office. So 1 out of 11 years without him as a member of the front office. they've made the postseason. Just shows the impact that he's had on this team. What's the one thing before we let you go, Craig? This has been an awesome little push, and obviously we're telling everyone to go follow at Alfie to the Hall. Let's get this account at 11,000 followers at the least.
Like
That'd be a nice number, nice round up for no reason in particular.
Yeah, I like
what's the one stat that you've learned from this process through maybe that you didn't even know about Alfie, or one that you just want to highlight as being this is kind of our silver bullet rather of why we've got a great case?
I really like his numbers when you adjust them for era, right? When you do that, it like he jumps up a lot of lists once you start kind of looking at the way, like, because you can go back and watch highlights from the 80s and 70s, and like my son always does this too. He's like, could you imagine if Connor McDavid played back then? Is like, yeah, he would absolutely destroy the league, but that's using hindsight in
and he would also get rocked by Scott Stevens pretty quickly.
Sure.
Too.
Like
so
the rules were a little different.
There.
Yeah, the rules were different then, right? Like you could clutch and grab and bury and just like shadow a superstar, and make his life miserable. Like that doesn't happen as much these days in that regard. But when you start looking at his adjusted era stats, it's like this guy's top 50 in all time. Like,
are there more than 50 players in the Hall of Fame?
I think so. My last check,
okay.
There was, and like I mentioned, I don't have these directly in front of me, but his comparisons to like forwards who are already in the Hall of Fame. Again, he's like he's near the top, not near the top of that list, but he's ahead of a lot of guys who are already in. So how do you make the case? Do you point out, okay, he's better than the guys that are in, or do you say all the stuff he's done and he deserves to get in more than these guys? I think that makes the case. And I mean, like some of the names, and we saw it on your list of his draft years, like Patrick Elias, like that's another guy, McGillney, the Sedins, like there's some other names out there. Yeah.
500 goals.
There's some other names out there with some fan bases behind them that are going to make some noise and things like that. And so those are some of the comparisons we looked at, right? Especially the Sedins. Like I would say that they're pretty on par. The difference is there's two of them, right? They won maybe some bigger major awards. Alfie kind of maybe
they should go in on one plaque, the Sedins.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things. It's like, Jesus, these guys get to do everything together. So I mean, the great players, I definitely think that they're Hall of Fame worthy. But when I say that, it's like, okay, I think Daniel Alfredsson is more Hall of Fame worthy. So these are all guys that I think are going to get in, and it's going to take time, and it's already taken time with Alfie, right? He retired like years ago. Like it's
too much time,
right? So it's like before too much time passes, like let's just get this one right. Let's get that guy in. We'll all quiet back down, and then until it's time for I guess. Who'd be next? I don't even think about that. But listen, that's the team's problem. We'll do this one, and then they can do the next one.
We'll do this one for sure. 289 players are in the Hockey Hall of Fame as it stands right now, and it's a travesty that Daniel Alfredsson is not among them. As much as we'd like to forget his last season as well, he's one of, I believe, only a handful at most. I want to say he's the only player, but I cannot confirm that he's the only player to lead his team in scoring as a rookie and in his final year in the league, which is just
interesting.
Absolutely incredible. You can say maybe Datsuk Zetterberg were injured that year in Detroit, but you know what? It's not how, it's how many. And you look back and he was first there. Craig, keep doing some great work. We always appreciate you. Now that you're in the Restream studio, you're officially friend of the show territory. So we'll have you back on as always. And keep up the great work with Volume of Thought and Alfie to the Hall. Make sure you're following along, and at Craig Medaglia, the legend himself. Thanks for joining us today, Craig.
Yeah, boys. Thanks for the support too.
Stick taps to Craig Medaglia for joining us. Always a great interview with him. We had him on a few months ago. It was a fantastic conversation. You always will go back and find that wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube. All right, time to get to our draft rankings. But before we do, Pilsy, you got a word from one of our favorite sponsors.
Yeah, Craig's the best. We always love having him on our show. And speaking of the best, are you looking for the best protein bar out there? Well, if you are, I'm here to tell you that you are a lucky listener, because we can tell you all about the best protein bar out there. It's Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. What I love about Built Bar, Ross, is they focus on making their bars taste good, and then they say, okay, how can we make this healthy? An example, the Built Puffs. It's a marshmallow chocolate bar. That doesn't sound very healthy. What about a protein-infused marshmallow chocolate bar? That sounds amazing. All Built Bar protein bars are covered in 100% chocolate. The protein bars, the puffs, and they're even bringing out new granola bars. So check those out for sure. Built Bar, they have so many different flavors. If you haven't tried them yet, I recommend getting the mix box. There's banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate. They got brownie, they got coconut. Every flavor I've tried, I've liked. But don't just take my word for it. Head to built.com right now. Use our promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Once more, guys, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. It's Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar.
All right, back to the Locked On Senators draft rankings. Coming in at number 14 with an average rank of 17.14, a player who certainly made a name for themselves with a fantastic WHL playoffs. It's defenseman Kevin Korchinski.
Kevin Korchinski. He is, Ross, when I finished my notes about him, I came to the conclusion that this isn't a defenseman, it's an offenseman. And I've said that about a couple guys in this draft, but with Korchinski, I really think it rings true. Like, just look at these numbers for the kid. 67 games, 65 points. And in the playoffs, like you mentioned, he had a great playoffs, 25 games, 19 points. This guy is all about putting the puck in the back of the net and helping his teammates do the same thing. And where he really thrives is in transition to get the puck going north and into the offensive zone.
No doubt. You look at 61 assists in 67 games. You know he's getting the boys involved. That's a popular teammate right there. Just handing out apples like he's a farmer. And you look at it in the postseason, 19 points, but 6 goals. So he had more goals in 25 playoff games than he had in 67 regular season games. And he's skyrocketed up the rankings. He'd be even higher on our average if Bob McKenzie had put out an updated list, because right now these are his post-World Junior rankings, and he's the only guy who has him in the 20s, down at 25. Elite prospects, their draft guide, out now, available now. They have him at 19. Craig Button at 18. Scott Wheeler at 17. Pronman at 16. Peters at 14. And Ferrari at 11. So this might be the first time where half of the scouts have him in consecutive order. This guy's range is clearly a lot tighter than the ones we've been working with in the past. And a big reason for it is this playoff. He's a late riser in terms of the overall draft perspective. At the start of the year, you're like, okay, maybe he could be a first-round pick, but talk about solidifying your position. No better way than doing it on the biggest stage. And nobody was going to beat that Edmonton Oil Kings team. It was just their year. They're a wagon from Genther to Gooley to Casa and goal. Like, just an overall juggernaut of an offensive team. But Korchinski, throughout the WHL playoffs, made it known that the bigger the game, the better he was going to perform. This guy is going to be a power play quarterback for years to come at the NHL level. I think he's still pretty raw. I would say he's at least 3 years away from making an impact at the NHL level. But the raw tool, standing 6'2", 185 pounds, left shot defenseman, I don't know if he gets past the Anaheim Ducks at 10 pills. That's how high I think he could end up going in this draft.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at where he could be drafted, it's going to be, teams are going to have their preference, and we're going to cover another defenseman in today's show, but there's a trio of defensemen that are going to go after the right shot guys, and it's basically going to be take your pick which of those guys you prefer, and then the other teams will have their pickings of the guys that have fallen to them. I think they're all very similar, but there's certain things like with Korchinski, what I like about him, Ross, is he doesn't rush things when he's trying to break out in transition. And what I mean by that is, instead of just being like, I got to go north all the time, like 100% just move that puck up, even if it results in a turnover, even if I have to force a pass, I got to get the puck moving north. Well, he doesn't do that. He does a good job of cutting back and waiting to see if there's a better play. Like, he's not just going to force that pass. He'll cut back, let the attackers kind of shift and flow, and then realize where his options are. And that's when he makes his move. And he does a really good job of that cutback. And then he gets guys to chase him too. Like, he'll cut back, go behind his own net. And then I don't understand what these players are doing, Ross, but I saw so many highlights of guys chasing him around the net. That's exactly what he wants you to do. He's baiting you into doing that. And then he goes obviously the other side of the net, and now it's a 5-on-4 breakout. Essentially, the opponents are down a man because he's still behind the net trying to catch up here. And that's why I think Korchinski is a great part of a power play too, because we've talked about it a bunch. Getting into the O-zone once the puck has been cleared is half the battle of a power play. If you can't get back across that blue line, who cares if you have Josh Norris, Steven Stamkos, and Alex Ovechkin? If they can't set up in their office, it doesn't matter. So Korchinski is a guy that's going to get those guys set up into their office.
No question. Offensively, he's unbelievable. Even elite prospects, despite having him 19th overall, call him the 5th best offensive defenseman in the draft. They have shades of, and I like that better than a player comparable, because then you're kind of boxing them in. There's shades, and elite prospects has shades of John Klingberg and shades of Jake Gardiner from his time. So with that comes the inherent issue away from the puck and in his own zone defending.
Jake Gardiner's a good one. I think that's a really appropriate one. Yeah,
definitely not a strength of his, boxing out in front of the net or battling in the corners.
Yeah, and there's been some playoff moments where he's had dash 4. Wasn't he dash 5 the one game? But then you start looking and you're like, yeah, that's awful. And ultimately, that kind of cost the Leafs a couple series. Is Gardiner collapsing in big games? But he got them there. He put up big points, and he was a big reason why guys were able to have success in the power play. So you can't fully blame him. And that's where, if we're getting into some of the negatives about Korchinski, that's where you start seeing this, Ross. I mean, we mentioned it, EP Draft Guide out. That's, I would say, our number one source. 854 pages.
Elsie, I just clicked print on it. I didn't realize that it was
what
so
are you
big.
doing? You're killing trees.
Look at this.
Oh, no, Ross. It's all online. Don't.
And
kill
you know
those
what the worst
poor
part
trees.
is? You know what the worst part is? I ran out of ink when I got to the best prospects.
Oh man, yeah. But anyways, like I was saying, their draft guide is just incredible. It's look at all that work. Like, that's insane what they do.
This isn't even half it.
Yeah,
this isn't even half it. It's unbelievable.
I
got a lot of reading to do.
Exactly, we all do. But EP, what I like is they show each of their scouts scouting reports from all the games they go to. That's how it ends up being so long. They scout a lot of players and a lot of games. And they mentioned he's one of the worst on puck defenders in the draft. He's not able to engage with attackers well, and he just kind of watches the puck going around. And they even went as far to say that sometimes he's a complete liability on defense, and it's better for him to just simply get off the ice and get someone else on there. So when I say Kevin Korchinski is an offenseman, this is what I'm talking about. You got to take the good with the bad. The good's real good, but the bad's real bad.
Yeah, and when we're looking in transition, he was listed as a top 5 guy by almost every scout at Elite Prospects. And as we mentioned, when you look at what he brings, it's offense. He's an offensive-minded guy. That's why it's like, all right, who could he be a good fit for? There's a few teams. I mentioned Anaheim, like they already got Drysdale, who's a pretty like two-way guy, but more offensive leaning. Now Korchinski, I think we mentioned he's a left shot defenseman, which, you know, is a little more common than not, but I would be surprised if he's not the third defenseman off the board. Simply when we're comparing him to Denton Matejchuk from yesterday, it's just the size. Like, that's probably the tiebreaker between them. Like, Matejchuk's probably a bit better in his own zone, despite being a little less in terms of physical stature. But what Korchinski does, he does elite. And then you're going to find a coach or a GM who says, all right, if we just focus on this one area of his game, we can improve it. Whereas with Matejchuk, you're like, all right, he's great at the WHL level, but will this skill translate versus men? I think the transition ability for Korchinski is a certain reason why he's been such a riser up these charts. And, well, there's a reason why you need offensive defensemen in the NHL. And he's going to quarterback a power play. Like, there's no doubt in my mind this kid's an NHL defenseman. But does he go 10 or does he go 15? I think that's kind of the range we're looking at for Kevin Korchinski.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think when you're comparing him to Matejchuk, who we just covered in yesterday's show, go check that out. Very similar, though. Like, Matejchuk, 65 games, 64 points.
Yeah.
He's only 1 point behind. But where I think Korchinski's offense rises above Matejchuk, Matejchuk has a little bit better defending. So that kind of balances out in that scenario. But I mean, if you've got a scenario where, let's say, Korchinski gets put up beside a shutdown veteran defenseman and he doesn't have to worry so much about the defensive side of it, then you've got something that works there. And EP mentions this. It's better to have a guy that has the natural instincts to play offensively and is able, like their mind works that way, and they need to work on defense, because defense, that's more of a coachable side of the game, right? Like you can tell a player, you can drill into their head reps. This is what you need to do in this situation. All right, you're not good at getting the puck. We're going to do 100 puck retrieval drills just over and over for hours, and you're going to figure this out. Whereas offensively, like you have to have that born creativity. Like you can't really teach that. So it's better from a prospect point of view to have those offensive instincts and be able to be coached defensively. And that's where Korchinski, that's the hope, is what's going to be when a team picks him to develop him.
Before I get your stars, Pillsy, I think this quote from Scott Wheeler says it all. Korchinski lives and dies trying to guide play with and without the puck with his mobility, pivots, and directional changes. Lives and dies with it, for better or worse.
Yep, and that's the thing. Like when he does those cutbacks and sometimes rescans, sometimes he makes a risky pass anyways. Yeah. But the odd time, or most of the time, I should say, he's making a smarter pass than he would have that first time. And sometimes when he does the cutback, the EP was mentioning in one of their videos, he doesn't quite do it with enough edges, and he ends up just slowing himself down, and then he just gets tied up. So there's good with the bad. He's got a lot of work to do, as a lot of young defensemen do, but the talent is there, and the playoffs for Seattle was his coming out party, and people could see what he could do on a big stage.
How many stars, Pillsy?
I've got him at, Kevin Korchinski at 3 stars here. And because you're talking about him going 10th overall, so that's a difficult spot for the Sens to get into, or he's going to go sometime in the early teens. I don't think the Sens are looking for a left shot offenseman in their prospect pipeline here. So for that reason, I give him 3 stars, just because the defense is so bad. I think it's going to take years to coach out here, and he's not the guy I would really target if the Sens do in fact decide to do something with that 7th and move back into the teens.
All right, coming in at number 13 on our Locked On Senators NHL draft rankings, we're going back to the Ontario Hockey League. So a run of CHL defensemen concludes with Russian-born Pavel Mintyukov. What do you think about the big Russian kid?
He's very similar to Kevin Korchinski, which is great that we have them kind of side by side here. Yeah, and Mintyukov is one of those guys that we talked about with Maciek, with Korchinski, that they're kind of the trio of left shot defensemen that teams are going to have their pick of which of these guys do we prefer for different reasons. And as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, for the listeners, I'll read out the stats, but very similar to Matejchuk and Korchinski. 67 games played, although 17 goals. He's putting up a lot more goals than these guys. 45 assists, good for 62 points. So all 3 of these guys passed the 60-point mark, which is pretty damn impressive, especially considering Mintyukov. He missed last year in the OHL. He was playing in Russia. He got a couple games in the MHL. Then he decided, I'm going to come over to North America. OHL shuts down for a year, unfortunately, but he made up for it big time, as he was 3rd in the OHL for points by a defenseman. So he came out with a bang.
Not only points, Pillsy, 17 goals to his name, 45 assists, 28 penalty minutes. He's ranked as high as 7th on Craig Button and Elite Prospects list. But then the flip side, Scott Wheeler has him all the way down at 25, Tony Ferrari at 23. In the middle, we've got Corey Pronman at 18, Bob McKenzie at 16, and Chris Peters as well here at 17. So that's an average of 17.42. You referenced Russia, grew up in the Dynamo, easy for me to say, Moscow program. But this guy is unbelievable in transition. How many times did you watch him swoop behind the net? Goalie just stops it there for him. And next thing you know, it's bingo, bango, bongo, and there's a great scoring chance down at the other end of the ice. Elite Prospects was just lauding that ability. And each one of their scouts has to put in their best transition defenseman. Mintyukov was 2nd on David St. Louis' list, 2nd on J.D. Burke, 2nd on Daniel G., 1st on Mitch Brown's. So you get where I'm going with that. This guy, he thrives with the puck on his stick, especially coming out of his own zone and making the right read and giving the puck to the right guy in certain situations. So this is a player, I think we have the order just off. I would probably have, if it was my personal rankings, Matejchuk above Korchinski, but Mintyukov, I take over both of them.
Yeah, okay, that's where I'm at as well. And I think in our mock draft that you guys will watch later on, I was a little higher on Korchinski, but after looking at Mintyukov a little bit more, I would give him a slight edge for a couple reasons here. You mentioned his game in transition. Where he differs from Korchinski is Mintyukov, he doesn't do that cutback. He gets the puck and he's like, I'm going north, and I'm going north quickly, and he doesn't make any hesitations. Now, like Korchinski's approach, though, you got to take the good with the bad, because often he's able just to push past opponents that just simply aren't ready to contain his speed, or they're trying to get him to hesitate, but he just won't, and he makes smart, quick decisions. But when you're just going north all the time, you're going to end up forcing turnovers just because you're just trying to force things too much, and you're going to get caught eventually. You're going to get caught red-handed, and they're going to strip the puck and turn it over the other way. But he excels in the transition game, and what I like about him is he plays a give-and-go style type of transition game, which I think is underused in the NHL a lot now. Like, a lot of times, the defenseman just makes a big first pass, like, across their own blue line, and then that forward now just carries it from the red line and into the O-zone, which is fine. That's a good quick way to move the puck, but it doesn't exactly allow for a lot of creativity, and it becomes very easy to read and shut down if your opponents. Where Mintyuk, he really does a good job of having those give and goes, and he keeps things interesting so that it's not just a one-trick pony and teams aren't able to create defensive systems to just shut him down easily. So I think there's a lot of value to be had there.
There certainly is. He's ever improving as well. He took a little while to adjust when he came over, according to Scott Wheeler, but then he just absolutely blew up after that. Like, the offense, as we mentioned, everything kind of pops with him. And I like what the shades of is for elite prospects here. John Carlson from the Washington Capitals, of course, a Norris nominee, like always around a point per game, it seems, the last few years. But certainly they have shades of that. Now, a Western Conference scout tells elite prospects, quote, he's a wild stallion that hasn't had the benefit of playing in structured coaching. He's got all the tools to be a difference maker, but needs some proper development that he won't get in Saginaw. Whoa, little shot at the Saginaw development system.
I mean, fair shot. Like,
can't really tell you any Saginaw Spirit players that are dominating the NHL.
No, none are really coming to mind, if I'm being honest. And yeah, that's the thing with Pavel Mintyukov, is that he was thrown into a team that was very bad. Only the Niagara team did worse than them in the OHL. They did not make the playoffs. And it was his first year playing over in North America, and he was able to thrive like this. And EP, like you mentioned, they give little awards here, and they gave him the top offensive defenseman award in this draft. And you mentioned some comparables. Corey Pronman compared him to Brandon Montour. I like that as well. I think that one works for him here. And he's just like, I love the wild stallion analogy, because it's like, you know, at the rodeo when there's like a bucking bronco and they're like stuck in the gate, and then they just like give him one last like push, and then they open the gate and he's going crazy and no one knows what he's going to do. That's what happens here.
Okay, can I get way off topic again?
Yeah, do it. That's what we do.
So Cole Perfetti, we got to give a little shout out. Saginaw Spirit.
Yeah, see, I didn't even think of that.
2 guests of Locked On Senators. Cody Bass and Paul Bissonnette.
Yes, yeah, I forgot Biz played there. Yep.
And are you ready for the cherry on top? Or should I say the cherry on Tom? Pyatt, a Saginaw Spirit alumni as well. But yes, getting back to Mintyukov, I think that it's perfect. He was voted by Elite Prospects as the best offensive defenseman in the draft. Period. More than Nemec, more than Jiricek. The number 1 offensive defenseman in the draft, 2nd best defenseman in transition, and the 4th best vision. Ironically, Elite Prospects' lowest grade on him is his shot that contributed 17 goals last season. Just imagine what he would have put up in the OHL, Pilsy, if he had that extra year of development last season. So what's he going to do next? I think it's going to be a super interesting conversation to have, because is he a guy who's going to go to the AHL right away, right? Because those overseas players that come to the OHL, they're not destined to be sent back necessarily to that league. So he could step in and maybe get that better coaching that this one scout thinks he needs. But with Scott Wheeler, he just wants to see a little bit more in his own zone from him. And I understand that too. But with a wild stallion, you don't put them in a farm, right? You have to let them run wild and do their thing. So I think that he's a guy who's going to need to be in the right system at the NHL level. Like, he can't be in on Barry Trotz's coach team. It's just not going to fit him. He needs to be in a run and gun. Like, imagine him on Colorado, the way those defensemen always work in transition. He needs to be put in a situation to succeed. And if he is, this guy's going to be a stud. I just don't know if Ottawa's the place for him.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. And I think the difference, though, from me comparing EP's kind of vision of Korchinski versus Mintyukov here is the fact that EP, as their scouting reports get later and later into the season, a lot of their comments were applauding his improvement on defense. Whereas with Korchinski, we didn't see that. Like, it just remained that he was still a liability, still putting up big points, but he's not helping out on defense. Whereas there's a lot more improvement defensively going on here.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know if we mentioned too. Left shot, 6'2", 194 pounds. So I mean, he's got that bucking Bronco.
He's got the size of it
too, right? But just let him fill out a couple extra years, and we'll see. Because the offense has always been there for him. So let's see what he can do at the next level. I like that John Carlson comparable though, because there's times where you look at him in the own zone and you're like, "What the hell's going on?" But when the puck's on his stick, you're like, "Oh man." I understand now why he's – yeah, that's what's going on right there. So I'm pretty high on him, all things considered. Still 3 stars because of the position he plays. If he was a right shot guy, it'd be 4. But left shot, just not a need. This is not a fit for the Ottawa Senators, but still 3 stars because I love the raw tools that this guy possesses.
Yeah, and I mean, on my scale, it's kind of similar because you had Kevin Korchinski at 2.5. I had him at 3, so I'm bumping Mintyukov up a little. I got him at 3.5 just because I think we're already seeing that defense getting better and the offense is still there. And with a weaker shot, still getting 17 goals, if he can work on that shot as well. So obviously what that tells me is he gets into the right spots to have his shot work. He doesn't have to just rely on the fact that he's got a good shot from low percentage spots that are just going in. He's getting into the right areas and he's joining the rush at the right time and getting himself open for teammates for a good pass and a good opportunity. So I've got him at 3.5 stars.
All right. Appreciate you making Locked On Senators your first listen today. And again, Alfie to the Hockey Hall of Fame. We need to make it happen. Shout out to Craig Medaglia for joining us, a great friend of the show. Yep. We appreciate him very much. If you want more on the Ottawa Senators, maybe some trade speculation, I made an appearance on Locked On Wild with Seth Tupal talking about Kevin Fiala and what it might take to make him an Ottawa Senator. Pilsy, we got a big show tomorrow as well. We're nearly into the top 10. Can you believe it? We're still working away on our mock draft. We've got interviews planned coming your way over the next 2 weeks. So stay locked on Senators wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. We are inching closer. We said 2,500 and we got a couple jerseys to give away. Right now, I believe we are 110, give or take, away. So tell a friend, be a friend, tell a friend, and make sure to get that number pumped up. Because I don't know who else is doing 5 shows a week in the off season, or is it just us?
Not too many, I'll say that.
A market inefficiency, but we do really appreciate you joining us each and every weekday right here on the show. We'll be back for more tomorrow. For Brandon Pillar, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.